There is a moment every Shih Tzu owner dreads, a moment that arrives without warning and leaves a fracture in the bond between human and dog, the moment your voice becomes the loudest, most frightening thing in your Shih Tzu's entire world. And what most people never realize is that a Shih Tzu does not hear your voice the way other dogs do. They don't filter tone through logic. They don't analyze emotion. They don't decode whether you're yelling because they misbehaved or because you're stressed or tired. They only absorb the raw intensity of the sound. To them, your raised voice is not a correction. It is a storm. Their tiny ears, built to detect subtle emotional shifts, pick up tension like an alarm system, amplifying fear in a body genetically wired for sensitivity. The scientific truth is brutal. The cortisol level in a Shih Tzu spikes almost instantly when confronted with sudden loudness, and once that stress hormone floods their system, the emotional damage lasts for hours, sometimes for days. Unlike confident, independent breeds whose identity remains intact, even when scolded, Shih Tzus are companion dogs to the core. Dogs that evolved to read the emotional climate of palaces, not the intensity of a sharp human shout. When your voice cracks the air, their entire nervous system contracts. What makes this so devastating is not simply the sound itself. It is how the Shih Tzu interprets it. They are not wired to believe they did something wrong. They are wired to believe that you, the person who is their whole universe, suddenly became unsafe. That is the moment the tail lowers. The ears fold, the body shrinks, and the gaze breaks. They don't withdraw because they feel guilty. They withdraw because the emotional foundation they stand on has shaken. For a Shih Tzu, whose sense of self-worth is built almost entirely on the stability of their bond with their guardian, a sharp tone is like the ground splitting under their paws. The fear they feel is not a quick flash, it imprints. Their brain, designed to remember emotional events more strongly than neutral ones, stores the memory like a snapshot, the volume, the tension, the shock, and once stored, that memory replays itself during later interactions. You may reach out gently next time, but somewhere deep inside, the Shih Tzu hesitates, wondering if the softness will stay or if the storm will return. This hesitation becomes visible over time in small, heartbreaking ways. The way they approach you with slower steps, the way their eyes study your expression before deciding to come closer, the way their breathing quickens slightly when your voice rises even a little. Shih Tzus do not forget moments of fear easily, not because they are dramatic, but because they are emotional archivists. Every warm gesture becomes a treasure. Every harsh moment becomes a scar. And the darkest part is that a single moment of shouting can overshadow hours of affection. Not because the dog stops loving you, but because the world they trusted suddenly cracked open for a second, and fragile-hearted dogs remember the cracks. This is why raising your voice at a Shih Tzu is not simply a mistake. It is a wound that their tiny, devoted heart will carry long after the sound has faded. And for a breed that views you not just as their owner, but as the center of their emotional universe, that wound runs far deeper than most people ever see. There is a kind of heartbreak that Shih Tzu owners never see coming, because it doesn't arrive with growling, it doesn't arrive with snapping, and it doesn't arrive with any sign that looks dramatic enough to alarm a human. It arrives in silence. In the moment, a Shih Tzu realizes that the person they trust most is capable of turning their safety into confusion. For many people, playful teasing, sneaking up behind a dog, pretending to grab their paws, covering their eyes, nudging them while they're sleeping. tugging lightly at their tail, or making a sudden sound just to see a reaction, seems harmless, even cute. But to a Shih Tzu, whose emotional radar is more sensitive than most breeds could ever be, these moments do not register as jokes. They register as unpredictability. And unpredictability is the one thing the Shih Tzu nervous system is least equipped to handle. The Shih Tzu was bred for centuries to live close to humans, not as workers or hunters, but as emotional companions whose survival depended on reading expressions, tones, and intentions with exquisite accuracy. When you suddenly shift the emotional environment, turning calm into chaos, stillness into surprise, you force their brain into a state of instinctive alarm. Their heart rate spikes, their muscles tense, and their instinct tells them the world is no longer safe. Even if the threat came from the person they adore more than anything, the danger of teasing doesn't lie in the physical action. It lies in the emotional betrayal of predictability. A Shih Tzu is small, defenseless, and profoundly dependent on your consistency. When you laugh at their startled jump or think it's funny when they spin in confusion, what you don't see is the way their pupils dilate, the way their tail freezes mid-air, the way their breathing changes, the way their body processes the moment as fear, not play. What makes this especially destructive is that Shih Tzus absorb emotional shock in a deep, lingering way. Their memory for fear is sticky. The moment you trigger a startle response, their nervous system begins to associate your presence with a subtle layer of tension. They might still run to you. I still follow you from room to room. Still curl beside you on the couch, but now, woven into their affection, is a thread of hesitation. You may notice the way they pause before climbing onto your lap, or the way their ears draw back slightly when you reach toward them, or how they take a fraction of a second longer to decide whether they should trust the moment. These are not signs of stubbornness. They are signs of microfractures, forming in the trust they once held completely. The tragedy is that Shih Tzus rarely push back. They don't snap. They don't growl. They don't run away. Instead, they internalize. They swallow the discomfort and carry it quietly, turning it into nervous licking, restless sleep, excessive panting, or a sudden reluctance to be touched in certain areas. The owner assumes nothing is wrong after all. The teasing was just for fun, but the dog's heart is already reshaping itself around a new truth. The world is not always safe, and the one they love most can become unpredictable. For a Shih Tzu, whose emotional foundation is built entirely on consistency, gentleness, and the assumption that their human will never betray their sense of security, teasing is not a game. It is confusion wearing the mask of affection. And confusion, for a creature with a heart this soft, is the first step toward fear. There is a kind of silence that enters a Shih Tzu's heart when they are punished. A silence so heavy and suffocating that it lingers long after the correction ends. Because unlike independent or working breeds who can emotionally distance themselves from harsh treatment, the Shih Tzu's entire identity is built on closeness, softness, and the belief that their human is incapable of hurting them. The moment that belief is broken, with a slap on the rear, a jerk of the collar, a finger yab, a harsh shout delivered inches away from their face, or even just the cold withdrawal of affection, their world collapses in a way that is almost impossible to see from the outside, but devastatingly easy to feel from within. A Shih Tzu does not process punishment through logic. They do not connect the correction with the action you think you are teaching them about. their brain is wired differently. The emotional centers light up stronger than the behavioral centers, meaning the lesson they absorb is not, "I shouldn't do that," but "the person I love hurt me." When punishment strikes, the Shih Tzu's cortisol levels rise sharply, flooding their bloodstream with stress hormones that linger for hours afterward and push their nervous system into a state of hypervigilance. Their heart rate increases, their breathing becomes shallow, and their mind goes into a loop of confusion and fear. This is why so many Shih Tzus become submissive, overly quiet, or clingy after being scolded, not because they learned their lesson, but because the emotional wound destabilized them, and the tragedy deepens the more sensitive the dog. The deeper the wound, Shih Tzus, bred for companionship and emotional bonding rather than resilience or independence, take punishment as a personal betrayal. Their brains, primed for connection, cannot comprehend why the person who represents safety would suddenly become a source of pain or fear. So instead of understanding the correction, they internalize it. This internalization shows up not in dramatic displays, but in small, heartbreaking behaviors, the way they approach slowly with lowered ears, the way their eyes flicker away when you reach toward them, the way their tail stays half-mast instead of curled proudly over their back, or the way their body tenses the moment your tone shifts even a little. These signals are often mistaken for submission, but in reality, they are fractures in trust. And trust, once fractured in a Shih Tzu, does not rebuild easily. The breed's emotional memory is long. Their hearts store negative experiences with the same intensity they store loving ones. A single moment of harsh punishment can overshadow weeks of affection because their nervous system is built to prioritize emotional safety above everything else. What makes this issue even more haunting is how Shih Tzus try to repair the bond themselves. Instead of pulling away like some breeds do, many Shih Tzus become needier after punishment, shadowing your steps, watching you anxiously, trying desperately to regain certainty in a relationship that suddenly feels unstable. Their clinginess is not devotion, it is fear disguised as affection. A plea to restore the world to the softness it once had. And without knowing this, owners often punish again, reinforcing the cycle until the dog becomes quiet, anxious, timid, and heartbreakingly unsure of their own place in your life. A Shih Tzu does not forgive punishment easily. Not because they hold grudges, but because they hold emotions. Their hearts bruise deeply, and once bruised, they never become quite the same. There is a kind of pain that doesn't come from shouting or punishment, a quieter kind that slips into a Shih Tzu's heart so softly that humans rarely notice it happening. Yet, it reshapes the dog's entire emotional world. This is the pain of being overlooked, of being forgotten in small ways, of being left waiting in a silence they cannot interpret. For a Shih Tzu, whose identity is built almost entirely on closeness and predictability, even the smallest disruption in routine, a delayed meal, a walk that never happens, a night without the usual cuddle, a day where the owner is too distracted to meet their eyes, becomes a message their fragile nervous system takes very seriously. Shih Tzus are creatures of rhythm. Their bodies relax when life is consistent, their hearts steady when the world feels familiar, and their confidence grows when their human follows the patterns they rely on. When that rhythm falters, the Shih Tzu doesn't rationalize it, they feel it. A Shih Tzu waiting at the door for a walk that comes 30 minutes late isn't simply being impatient. Their cortisol rises, their breathing shifts, and their brain begins collecting emotional data that whispers, "Something is wrong." A Shih Tzu watching you scroll your phone, instead of answering their quiet stare, isn't just bored. They interpret that moment as a withdrawal of connection, because eye contact for them is a lifeline, a confirmation that the world is still safe. And the tragedy of this silent form of hurt is that Shih Tzus don't push back. They don't demand. They don't bark angrily for attention. Instead, they retreat inward, absorbing every missed moment like an emotional bruise. Their behavior begins to change in ways so subtle, it often escapes notice. The tail wags less fully. The eyes shine a little dimmer. Their steps behind you become slower. Hesitation replaces eagerness, and a kind of soft sadness settles into the way they rest their head on their paws. They still follow you, still sleep near you. I still love you with every fiber of their tiny body. But the certainty, the absolute, unshakable trust that once lived in their eyes begins to erode. They start sleeping lighter, waking more often to check where you are, licking their paws in moments of emotional confusion, or watching you with an expression that asks a question they cannot voice: "Have I done something wrong?" What makes this form of hurt even more devastating is that it accumulates. One forgotten moment becomes 2, then 10, then a pattern. And Shih Tzus record patterns like emotional archivists. They remember the nights they waited for you. They remember the days you walked past them without stopping. They remember when the routine that once made them feel secure began to dissolve piece by piece. And because they are so deeply bonded to their humans, the absence of attention hurts them more profoundly than many breeds ever experience. It tells their nervous system that the foundation of their world is shifting, that the person who defines their sense of safety might not be as emotionally present as before. The silence of neglect is the darkest silence of all for a Shih Tzu. They won't bark about it, but they will feel it with their whole heart. And once that silence builds enough weight, it becomes the heaviest burden a delicate, loving dog like a Shih Tzu can carry. There is a particular kind of fear that settles into a Shih Tzu not with violence or punishment, but with pressure. The pressure to socialize before they are ready, to adapt faster than their nervous system can handle, to accept new people, new sounds, new environments, as if their tiny heart were built for endless resilience. Shih Tzus were never bred to be flexible explorers or bold adventurers. They were bred for constancy, for softness, for the slow rhythms of palace chambers, where nothing changed abruptly and nothing demanded emotional endurance. So when a Shih Tzu is thrust into the hands of strangers, pushed toward other dogs, dragged through crowded streets, or forced into new spaces without the chance to process them, something inside them fractures in a way both silent and profound. Their nervous system, which depends on predictability to stay calm, and triggers a cascade of stress, signals the pupils dilate, the muscles stiffen, the breath becomes shallow, and the cortisol surges through their bloodstream like an alarm. And while another breed might shake it off, the Shih Tzu stores it. What makes this so haunting is that the fear doesn't always show itself in dramatic ways. A Shih Tzu won't necessarily bark or snap. They won't grow aggressive to signal discomfort. Instead, they freeze, or shrink into themselves, or tuck their tail so gradually you barely notice, or press their body closer to you in a way that feels like affection, but is actually a plea for stability in a moment that feels overwhelming. When you bring them into a loud cafe, or pass them from person to person because they are small and cute, or introduce them too quickly to a dog with stronger energy, they absorb it all. As one message, the world is unpredictable, and I am not safe. And unpredictability is a poison to a Shih Tzu's emotional ecosystem. Even subtle changes, moving their bed to another room, rearranging furniture, washing away their scent from blankets too frequently, shifting feeding times, altering walking routes without easing them into it can destabilize them. They are not stubborn, they are wired for environmental memory. Their sense of home depends on fixed landmarks, familiar smells, predictable sounds. When those landmarks vanish, they lose not just comfort, but a part of their identity. They begin watching you more intensely, in their eyes tracking your movements to anticipate what might change next. Their body tense, with the quiet desperation of a creature trying to hold itself together in a world becoming too loud, too fast, too uncertain. The emotional wounds deepen when the pressure is social. Being held by someone they don't know well. Being surrounded by hands reaching for them. Being expected to greet every relative or friend, as if affection can be forced. These experiences confuse them to the core. They want to please you, but they cannot override their fear. So they comply outwardly while breaking inwardly. And their tail wagging out of habit, but their body trembling, with signals of distress that most people mistake for excitement. Later, when the house is quiet, the fallout appears. They hide under tables. Avoid eye contact. Lick their paws for comfort. Or cling to your side as if the world outside your reach has become dangerous. And the final truth is the most painful of all. Shih Tzus do not forget these moments. They store every forced interaction, every overwhelming environment, every abrupt change in a vault deep in their emotional memory. Over time, these memories stack, shaping them into dogs who fear new things, who hesitate at open doors, who flinch at unexpected touches, who seem fragile, not because they were born weak, but because the world asked too much from a heart that was never built for chaos.